you so much, James, for joining me today. So, when we look at the results yesterday, it was hard to predict the outcome of the Sabah election right from the start. So, was there a clear winner, or did you expect the results when you expect the results late yesterday night?
Right. So we need to step back a bit earlier, say on Wednesday and Thursday, when there were three report based on surveys that was done during the campaign period. These three reports were issued by Ilhan. Second ones was by by Imam Research, and the third one by SEEDS Seeds, which is a Sabah-based research organizations. So basically, the consensus, if we read carefully between the lines of this report, was that Warisan was leading, but it was a very, very small lead, and that the results were highly contested. And this was confirmed in the article, a longish article written by Philip from the Star. Philip is a Sabahan himself. He also mentioned the fact that among the politicians he spoke to, it was supposed to be a very close election. But basically, Warisan was in the lead. So basically, my take on the situation was slightly different. I thought Warisan was in a much, much bigger lead. The reason why I thought Warisan would have a much better chances in winning was simply because, based on all the reports I received, was that Warisan was holding on to the East Coast states, Shafie's strong points, and he was holding on to all the Chinese and all the urban areas. So he only needed to win about one third to a half of all the Kadazan Dusun seats, and that will bring him over the so-called magic figure of 38, 39. So I was much more gung-ho compared to all these research reports. I think there was a last-minute push on Thursday and Friday night, and I think that made a difference. I'm still talking to people involved in the process, but it would appear that this time there was a very, very strong push by parties, in particular PBS and Star, at the very last minute. They concentrated all their resources in the Kadazan Dusun areas, where Warisan was at its most vulnerable. As many of your viewers know, Warisan had always had this problem in that even in 2018, when they were fighting to bring down the Barisan National government, in the interiors of Sabah, Warisan will always tag as a PTI party. Part of it has got to do with the fact that Shafie himself, there's always been a question mark whether he is a real Sabahan. And this again came out in this election clearly, and he was forced not only to deny it, he had to say where his grandmother came from, where his grandfather came from. He showed off his ancestral home in Sabah. But again, this tagline appears to be quite effective in the interiors of the KDM areas. The other thing that people have told me about was that this time the spending in the selective KDM area was quite high. So if you look at especially Twitter, there were photographs showing stuff being moved around. There were even photographs of people given money. But of course, we do not know how extensive it is. But what we can say for certainty is that, again, this is nothing new. This is more or less a permanent feature of campaigning in the interiors of not only in Sabah, but also in Sarawak. You have to remember the money is not outright bribe. In some ways, it is also to pay for expenses. It is very expensive to campaign in the rural areas, and sometimes many of these voters in rural area, they don't see politicians that often, probably just before elections, and therefore they expect something from politicians. I mean, you can call it vote buying if you want, but essentially, I think there was a much stronger than normal push at the last minute. In fact, I remember clearly on Friday night, a very good friend of mine at Sabahan living in the area sent me a message saying that it's raining heavily now, and what he meant was that it's raining heavily in money. So I expected that process to happen, but I suspect this time it was much more targeted, much more sophisticated, and that's the reason why some tweeters, people were able to tweet the what they call the pictures out, because I think it was done in quite a very targeted area. Therefore, although they were careful, they were doing it in those areas where they knew Warisan was vulnerable.
Now, what were the some of the things that you noticed from Warisan Plus campaign that they did not address this kind of thing? In fact, that they were unable to gain the simple majority, despite that overwhelming sort of support. But these targeted areas, they still can't get it.
part of the reason was that Warisans, for whatever reason, in the KDM areas, their machinery did not work very well. Uh, I'm actually very surprised because I would have thought after 2 years in government, they will be able to access state government resources. But when I asked my friends, they were telling me that a lot of the state bureaucrats were not moving, or if they moved, they were moving very slowly. So either they did not plan it properly, or another one of my friends was laughing. He's actually a supporter of BN, and he told me that the reason is because some of these Warisan people overconfident. So whatever it is, I think we need to make a deeper study, and I think it's too early to try to second guess. But what we can say is quite clear that in the urban areas it was a solid block for Warisan via the DAP. In the eastern coast, Warisan did held on to the seats. But overall, because of the way the population is structured, Warisan did get a higher percentage overall. It's just that because we use first past the post, and the way the structure of the rural interior sits, that's where Warisan came out short. You have to remember it was very close. I mean, Warisan did end up with 32, and they were talking about a change of 2 or 3 seats, and they would have crossed over the 38 line.
And also to note that Warisan actually garnered more seats than the last election compared to this time. Means they are doing much better than before. Now
Yes,
we look
yes,
at it
yes.
too, right? The turnout has been one of the factors. Only 66.6% of the turnout. How would this be what were the reasons behind the 66.6?
I think what is very obvious is people from Peninsula Malaysia, the so-called young voters who tend to be supporters of Warisan, they didn't come back, and I think some of them did not come back, obviously, because if you live in the rural interiors, right, you really have to take 2 days of leave, Thursday and Friday, to come back. You can't just, not like KK can just fly in on Saturday, go and vote, and hang around tomorrow and go back to KL. Uh, I think part of it has got to do with difficulties in getting transport. But I think the two big problems they could not overcome was that there was limited flights, and secondly, I think some of them were worried about COVID. So if you look at it from a perspective of a young person living in a peninsula, especially you're not sure that how well the what do you call it, the system is in terms of health resources in your own village, right? You will second guess and say maybe I shouldn't go back. What if I end up spreading COVID-19 to the people in the villages? And you have to remember, in most of the interior villages of Sabah, right, you will see that uh, a lot of those people are older people, because some of the younger people they've already in the urban areas working. So I think COVID and the difficulty of coming back were the major factors. And also I've been told that it was actually much more expensive than normal to fly to Sabah. So I think if you add all these three things together, I think if you were a young Sabahan, in the interiors where you have to take a highlights for 2 or 3 hours to get to your village, if you're sitting in Kuala Lumpur, I think you will not come back, not for this round, because if you read the papers, you read the analysts, everyone was saying that Warisan was ahead. You might have second thoughts about coming back to support Warisan.
Now, so looking at it, right, towards the end of the campaign, and the results also showed that PCS, Parti Cinta Sabah, led by Anifah Aman, was totally wiped out. They did not win any seats. While Jeffrey Kitingan's PBS won 7 seats, and we saw the return of the old guards like Saleh Said Krawat and Pandika Amin Mulia. So, what do you see from this?
I don't really see much of anything. Part of the reason why I think PCS didn't do very well was simply they did not have time to introduce themselves to the wider public. In fact, if you spoke to people in Sabah PCS, right, if you ask them who are the candidates, I think the only name they can name is Anifah.
Mm.
If you were to ask them for second or third name, they have to second guess, or they'll try to refer to the newspaper or something. So I think it's an issue with name recognition. I have to say I was also quite surprised that Anifa did make it. It was the same situation with Pandeka, but Pandeka in some ways had the advantage of using the name Usno. Usno is a very well known brand among the Muslim community in Sabah. They were the original champions of the Muslim community in Sabah, straight from the 60s onward when it was founded and led by Tun Mustafa Harun. So I'm not surprised that PCS lost all the seats. In fact, I would have been surprised if they won more than one. When I say one, I mean Anifah himself will win because of the brand recognition thing. But what is interesting is that there was not as many people I thought in terms of losing the deposits. I make a public announcement that I expect 300 to lose the deposits. In fact, only 275. Close enough, but still. My own calculation was somewhere between 290 to 305, 306 will lose the deposits. So obviously, some of the independents or smaller parties themselves, they just managed to scrape through 1/8 of the vote, and they'll get back their 5,000. Although if they don't clean up the posters, they'll lose another 3,000.
So Perikatan National Chief Muhyiddin Yassin, who's also a Prime Minister, said that he will call for a snap election soon. So would that be likely the case with the recent spike, even in the midst of the COVID-19 cases?
No, I don't take his call for a snap election seriously. I need to define this. When I say a snap election, I mean before the end of the year. The reason is because all the studies I've seen, all the surveys I've seen suggest that if there's going to be a step election soon, PAS and UMNO will grab all the Malay majority seats in Malaya, and Bersatu will basically be wiped out. So it is not in Muhyiddin's position to ask for a snap election. Next year is a separate issue, but this year he will try his very best to avoid a snap election. In fact, if there's going to be a snap election, the trigger will not be Sabah. The trigger will be our old friend Anwar Ibrahim.
All right. So thank you so much for your input.